My name is Claire, and for most of my life, my family saw me as the poor relative. You know the type, the one with more dreams than money, who chose passion over a paycheck. But tonight, as I drove up to my family's mansion, I wasn't that girl anymore. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a homecoming. My brother Ethan thought he was being clever, laughing at me in front of everyone. He thought I was still just the little sister he could dismiss. But I'd learned a few things about business since he kicked me out. The table was set for a family dinner, but I was about to serve them a meal they'd never forget. What happens when the person they dismiss turns out to be the one holding all the cards? Come with me, and I'll show you how one night can change everything. You're coming, right? Mom will lose it if you don't. My brother Ethan's voice still echoed in my head hours later as I sat in my car outside the Hale family mansion, hands gripping the steering wheel. I was here. Tonight I was back, invited to a family dinner I never thought I'd attend again. But this time the story was different. I wasn't the failure anymore. I was the storm they didn't see coming. The Hale mansion looked exactly the same, though everything inside me had changed. The columns gleamed under soft golden light, the front yard manicured to perfection. Even the scent of the roses, Mom's precious English imports, carried that same mix of beauty and suffocation. I took a deep breath before stepping out my heels, clicking against the stone path. Every step felt like walking into my past. The memory was a ghost that still followed me. This was the same house where I'd been told more times than I could count that I'd never amount to anything. The same dining room where I'd once been humiliated in front of relatives, dismissed as the poor sister with too many dreams. The old pain was a dull ache, but it no longer controlled me. It fueled me. When I reached the heavy oak door, it opened before I could knock. It was Anna, Ethan's fiancée, perfect as always in her pearl-white dress and practiced smile. Claire, she said, lips curving just enough to seem polite. It's been forever. 5 years, I replied, matching her tone. Feels longer. She tilted her head, a gleam of pity, or was it superiority in her eyes? Ethan said you've been keeping busy with that little startup thing. How's that going? I smiled, careful and calm. It's growing faster than I expected. Good for you, she said, already turning to lead me in. You know how he worries. Inside, the warmth of the chandeliers didn't reach me. The long mahogany table was set with crystal glasses and gold-rimmed plates, luxury the Hales clung to as proof of their dynasty. My mother Margaret sat at the head of the table, posture flawless, expression calculating. My father, Richard Hale, the legendary chairman of Hale Industries, stood near the bar swirling a glass of bourbon. Claire, my mother said, rising just enough to offer air kisses. You look, well. Well in her vocabulary was code for less disappointing than expected. My father nodded stiffly. Glad you could make it. It's been too long. Ethan entered, then tall, charming, confident, the golden boy of the family. He crossed the room with that CEO stride that once commanded admiration from everyone, including me. Claire. He smiled broadly, pulling me into a quick hug that felt more like a press photo. You made it. Of course, I said. Wouldn't miss it. He grinned. You sure this place isn't too fancy for you now? Didn't know how the startup scene eats these days. Laughter rippled across the table, light but cutting. My jaw tightened. He didn't mean it as a joke. He meant it as a reminder in his mind I was still the sister who'd left the family business to chase dreams instead of dividends. Mom clapped her hands softly. Let's sit. Dinner's ready. As we took our seats, I noticed the changes around the table, new wine, same faces. Ethan's assistant hovered near the door, probably taking mental notes for his next press release. Anna leaned into Ethan, whispering something before letting out a perfect musical laugh. My mother adjusted the napkin on her lap 3 times before speaking again. So Claire, she began, tell us about your company. I could hear the pause before company, as though she were quoting something she didn't quite believe in. It's called Luminex Technologies, I said, keeping my tone even. We build AI infrastructure for retail companies transitioning to digital. How fascinating, Anna said, eyes already glazing. Ethan smirked. Still trying to fix other people's businesses instead of building a real one, huh? I forced a smile. Sometimes fixing what's broken is more valuable than pretending it isn't. For a second, the air stilled. My father's fork paused mid-air. Then Ethan laughed, clapping once. Touché. I missed your sense of humor. Dinner began a parade of expensive dishes served by staff who'd known me since I was a kid. Every taste, every clink of silverware carried memories of silence and swallowed anger. Halfway through the meal, my father turned to Ethan. How's the merger progressing? Final stages. Ethan replied, puffing his chest slightly. We're acquiring the last of the smaller firms next quarter. The board's thrilled. Of course they are, my mother said proudly. You're saving the company just like your grandfather did. I sipped my wine. Funny, I murmured. That's not what the market data says. Ethan's head snapped toward me. Excuse me? Just an observation, I said lightly. Hale Industries' quarterly growth has been flat since last fall. And your stock down 12% since the merger announcement. My father frowned. You've been following our numbers. I read Forbes, I replied simply. Ethan's smile turned thin. You've always been good with details, Claire. Just not strategy. I met his gaze and held it. We'll see. He chuckled, turning to the others. You know, Mom, Claire's always had this way of making small things sound big. She's our resident dreamer. My mother smiled faintly. She always did have an active imagination. And that was it, the same old script. I'd lived this scene before the dismissal, the laughter, the quiet shame. Only this time I wasn't here to defend myself. I was here to watch the pieces move exactly where I needed them to. As the servers cleared the plates, Ethan leaned back in his chair, wineglass in hand. You know what I told my fiancé the other day? He turned toward me, his grin widening. I said, every family has that one relative we all root for out of pity. Ours just happens to be Claire. The table laughed, some politely, others genuinely. The sound cut through me like old glass, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I raised my own glass, steady and calm. Well, I said, my voice smooth, almost amused. I'll drink that. And as the wine touched my lips, I knew this dinner wasn't just a reunion. It was the setup. Tomorrow, when the papers hit the newsstands, they'd learn that the poor relative they mocked at dinner was no longer the forgotten sister. She was the woman who'd just signed the deal that would make her their new boss. Hale Industries had been our family's crown jewel for 3 generations. My grandfather built it from a small construction firm into a real estate empire that shaped half the city's skyline. My father, Richard, turned it into a corporate monument. And Ethan, he was supposed to be its future, the golden heir, the face of stability and strength. Me, I was the creative one, the dreamer who didn't understand how real business worked. When I was 24, I walked out of Hale Industries with nothing but a bruised heart and a promise to myself I'd never beg for a seat at that table again. The sting of fluorescent lights in the hallway and the sound of my brother's voice echoing from the conference room as I was escorted out, "It's not personal, Claire, it's business," still felt fresh. Back then, I didn't know that the best revenge doesn't come from anger. It comes from patience. I remembered the day it all began to unravel. It was a Thursday morning 5 years ago. I'd spent 3 months developing a digital expansion plan, a way for Hale Industries to modernize to use tech-driven leasing and AI data models to predict real estate trends. I'd poured every ounce of belief into it. Ethan barely glanced at the report. This isn't a startup pitch, Claire, he'd said, flipping through the pages like they were irrelevant. We deal with skyscrapers, not software. Dad nodded in agreement. Real estate is about brick and mortar, not apps and algorithms. We're not turning the company into Silicon Valley nonsense. I tried to argue, my voice trembling but determined. If we don't adapt, we'll fall behind. Competitors like DeLuca Holdings are already implementing predictive leasing platforms. Ethan cut me off with a laugh. DeLuca's a clown. His company's going to implode in 2 years. Trust me, little sister, some of us actually studied economics. By the end of that week, my proposal had been buried in a drawer, and I was reassigned to special projects, a polite way of saying they wanted me out of sight. 6 months later, my position was restructured. Ethan called me into his office, shut the door, and delivered the news himself. "It's better this way," he said. "You'll find your own thing. You're not built for this kind of environment." I still remembered the way he said built like I was defective. I packed my things, trying not to let them see how much it hurt. The only thing that kept me upright was the thought that someday they'd realize what they'd thrown away. For a while, I struggled. I took consulting gigs, small tech projects no one cared about. I worked with startups that failed within months. I learned how brutal the business world could be without the Hale name behind me. But failure has a way of burning you clean. It strips away ego until all that's left is grit. One of those startups changed everything. Luminex. Back then, it was a 3-person team working out of a basement with bad Wi-Fi and better ideas. They needed funding structure and strategy, things I'd learned watching my family empire eat itself alive. Within a year, we'd landed a deal with a major logistics firm. Within 2, we'd gone global. By the 3rd year, I was CEO. Luminex became exactly what Hale Industries refused to be: smart, adaptive, unshakable. And while Ethan was making headlines about mergers and vanity skyscrapers, I was building something invisible and unstoppable beneath him, a digital network that quietly connected every asset, every vendor, every potential buyer in the region. Last spring, when Hale Industries' debt began creeping up and the board grew restless, Luminex moved quietly. We bought shares through subsidiaries. I made sure no one could trace them back to me. My lawyers called it strategic accumulation. I called it poetic justice. Now sitting at that dinner table watching Ethan boast about his next revolutionary expansion, I couldn't help but think about that night in his office when he told me I didn't belong. I remembered the sting, the humiliation. But mostly I remembered the spark, that defiant whisper that said, "You'll show them." "Claire," my father's voice pulled me back to the present. "You seem distracted." I smiled faintly. "Just thinking about how far we've come." Ethan chuckled. Pretty sure I'm the one keeping this family's legacy alive." "Of course," I said. "You've done an excellent job." Mom nodded approvingly, oblivious to the irony bleeding from my tone. "He really has," she said. "We're all proud of the man he's become." "And I'm proud too," I said softly. "Proud of what our name will stand for next." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" I leaned back, the faintest smile on my lips. "You'll see." Outside the window, city lights shimmered against the dark skyline, those towers our family once ruled. Somewhere among them, Luminex's headquarters glowed in blue light, running on algorithms that would soon control the future of Hale Industries. As the dinner continued, I nodded when expected, smiled when polite, and memorized the expressions of every person at that table. None of them had any idea that the world beneath their empire was shifting, that their poor sister had built something big enough to swallow everything they'd ever known. The night was still young. The wine flowed, the laughter grew louder, and I sat quietly listening, waiting. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't come with shouting. It comes with silence. And tomorrow that silence would become the sound of everything changing. The next morning, sunlight poured through my apartment windows, cutting across the skyline like a blade. The city below pulsed with life horns, sirens, ambition, and somewhere within it, my family's empire slept in ignorance. I made my coffee the same way I always did. Black strong, no sugar. I didn't need sweetness. Not today. My phone buzzed with a dozen notifications, stock alerts, market movements, and one from my lawyer: "Everything's in place. The takeover can go live once you sign." I stared at the message for a long time, then looked out at the view. From my penthouse on Madison, I could see Hale Tower piercing the skyline like a monument to pride. My father's pride, my brother's arrogance, my family's curse. But pride has a way of burning the people who worship it. I still remember the night that fire started Thanksgiving 5 years ago. The dinner that changed everything. That night, I brought home a proposal for the board, a strategic partnership with an emerging green developer called Echelon Urban. It was a chance to innovate, to move Hale Industries into the future. But Ethan and my father dismissed it without a second thought, mocking my enthusiasm and my bright imagination. As I turned to leave, my father called after me. "We only criticize because we care, Claire." But Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "No, we criticize because she keeps trying to play CEO when she's barely qualified to be a receptionist." The laughter that followed was soft, but it burned deeper than any scream. It was that moment that I realized I could never change them from within. I didn't cry that night. I packed my office the next morning. Now, years later, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the cuff of my silk blouse. The woman staring back at me was no longer the girl who'd been laughed out of her own home. Her reflection was calm, steady, and just a little dangerous. My assistant Kara called as I grabbed my coat. "Claire, CNBC confirmed your interview for tomorrow. They're running the Luminex story ahead of schedule." "Perfect," I said. "And the Hale Industries stock still dropping." "Another 2 points since last night." I smiled faintly. "Good. Keep monitoring. Should we go public about your acquisition shares yet?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want them to hear it from me." Kara hesitated. "At the shareholder meeting, yes," I replied. "At dinner last night, Ethan called me his poor sister. Let's make sure that's the last time he ever gets to say that." As I walked through the lobby of my building, I passed a young doorman reading a financial magazine. He looked up and smiled shyly. "Miss Hale." "Sorry. Miss Winters? I saw an article about Luminex in Forbes." "You're kind of famous." I smiled back. "Fame fades. Execution doesn't." When I reached the car, I paused for a moment, watching the world rush by. My driver opened the door, but I wasn't ready to move just yet. The city was alive with possibility, every skyscraper a reminder of what ambition could build or dismantle. The Hales had taught me everything I needed to know about power. They taught me how easily it corrupts, how quickly it blinds, and how deeply it isolates. But they also taught me its language. And now I spoke it better than any of them. As we pulled into traffic, I glanced at the digital billboard on the corner of 54th and Lexington. It displayed a Hale Industries advertisement building the future since 1978. I almost laughed, because the future they were claiming to build now belonged to me. Later that afternoon, I would finalize the final stock purchase that would tip control in my favor. The next morning, the takeover documents would be filed. And the day after that, Hale Industries would wake up to a new CEO. A woman they once fired. A woman they once mocked. A woman who built her empire in the shadows they left behind. They lit the fire that night at that Thanksgiving dinner. I was just the one who learned how to turn it into light. I was 13 the first time I realized what our last name really meant. Hale opened doors other people spent lifetimes knocking on. It meant private schools, country clubs, charity galas where champagne flowed like water, and sincerity was as rare as kindness. My mother used to say, "Appearances are everything, Claire. Hale doesn't falter in public." What she meant was, don't let them see you bleed. For years I mistook that for strength. That illusion shattered the day I first walked through the glass doors of Hale Industries headquarters at 16. I remember the portraits of Hale men, never women, lining the walls, my father proudly gesturing, "That's your legacy." It hadn't felt like mine. Now, years later, I could still feel the echo of that building every time I saw it through the tinted window of my car. Hale Tower stood like a monument to arrogance, 52 stories of glass and shadow, each pane reflecting the city it refused to understand. This morning I wasn't driving past it. I was walking in. The security guard at the front desk, Rick, same as always, blinked in surprise as I approached. "Miss Hale, I thought you didn't work here anymore." "I don't," I said with a small smile. "But I have a meeting." He nodded quickly, scanning my visitor pass. "Top floor, right? Always," I said. The elevator ride felt like a memory looping in reverse. Each ding of the floor counter pulled me closer to the person I had once been, the one who believed her family would see her worth if she just worked hard enough. I could almost hear the sound of my heels echoing in those old hallways, the way Ethan used to tease me for walking too fast. When the doors opened, the air hit colder than I remembered. The receptionist, new probably temporary, looked up. "Can I help you?" I'm here to see Mr. Hale, I said. She frowned. Do you have an appointment? I met her gaze evenly. Not exactly, but he'll want to see me. Before she could argue, the double glass doors to the boardroom swung open. And there he was. Ethan Hale, CEO of Hale Industries. My brother. My rival. Claire, he said, a surprise flickering across his face before he composed himself. This is unexpected. I was in the area, I replied coolly. Thought I'd stop by. You don't mind, do you? Of course not. He gestured toward the conference table. We were just wrapping up the quarterly review. You remember Bernard from the board? The older man nodded politely. It's been a long time, Miss Hale. It has, I said, smiling. I hope the company's treating you better than it treated me. Bernard's eyebrows twitched, uncertain whether to laugh. Ethan cleared his throat. We're discussing our upcoming merger. It's a delicate timing. I'm sure, I said. Titan Holdings, right? The flicker of surprise in his eyes told me I was right. How did you... I shrugged. I read the news. He laughed softly like I'd said something charming. You always did have a knack for keeping tabs. I like to know where my shares are going, I said lightly. The room fell silent. Ethan's smile faltered. Your what? My shares, I repeated. In Hale Industries. He laughed again, too loudly this time. You mean the scraps Dad left you in the will, Claire, that's less than 1%? It's barely symbolic. It was, I said, until last month. Now the silence was heavy enough to crush marble. Bernard glanced at Ethan, confused. What's she talking about? I turned toward the projector screen displaying financial figures. Looks like your acquisition ratio's off, I said, tapping a line on the spreadsheet. You're counting privately purchased Class B shares as unsecured. They're not. Ethan's voice dropped. Claire, what the hell are you doing? Correcting a mistake, I said. See, those shares aren't unsecured because they belong to me. All of them. Collected quietly legally over the past 2 years. Through private equity firms, shell companies, and investment networks you've never bothered to notice. Bernard blinked. You own Class B stock? 28%, I said softly. And when combined with my partner's holdings, well, let's just say I have majority influence now. Ethan stood slowly, his chair scraping the floor. You're bluffing. I never bluff, I said, my voice steady and low. You should know that by now. My father had entered at some point. I hadn't even seen him arrive, but now his voice thundered from behind me. Claire, what is the meaning of this? I turned, meeting his gaze. For the first time, I felt no fear, only a strange, cold clarity. It means the company you built, the empire you controlled, it's changing hands. His face darkened. You're out of your depth. No, I said quietly. I was born in the deep end. You just never noticed I learned how to swim. For a moment, no one spoke. The boardroom felt smaller, suffocating under the weight of my words. I watched the realization spread across Ethan's face the exact second he understood what I'd done. The years of humiliation, the mockery, the dismissal, it all condensed into this single exquisite silence. I straightened my jacket, my heart steady. You once told me I'd never belong in this boardroom, I said. But you were wrong. I don't belong here as an employee. I belong here as the owner. Ethan's voice came out low and shaking. You can't do this. I already have, I said. The elevator doors opened behind me, and my assistant Kara stepped out carrying a folder. She handed it to me wordlessly. I opened it, sliding a single document across the table toward my brother. Takeover confirmation, I said. Effective immediately. My father's hand slammed against the table. This is betrayal. No, I said, meeting his eyes. This is justice. That moment would echo in me for years to come. I turned and walked out of the boardroom, the same one that had once thrown me away, leaving them behind in a silence thick enough to taste. Outside, the city's noise rushed back in raw and alive. I exhaled for the first time in years. The weight of the Hale name was finally mine to redefine. By the time I left the building, the rain had started a cold, steady drizzle that turned the city into glass. My reflection shimmered in every puddle, mocking the enormity of what I had just done. The takeover papers were signed, notarized, and filed. Hale Industries no longer belonged to my father or to Ethan. It belonged to me. The thought should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like gravity. Kara was waiting beside the car holding an umbrella. "It's done," she asked quietly. I nodded. "It's done." She hesitated, watching my face. "And how does it feel?" "Like standing on a skyscraper's edge," I said. "The view's beautiful, but one wrong step and everything's gone." She nodded, understanding more than I expected. "Your brother won't take this quietly." "I'm counting on that," I murmured. "I need him angry. Angry people make mistakes." We rode in silence for a while, the car slicing through the wet streets. The city was alive, but my mind was somewhere else back in that boardroom, the look in my father's eyes a mix of disbelief and something almost like fear. I'd wanted to see regret, but all I saw was pride cracked down the middle. When I arrived at the Luminex headquarters downtown, the building lights shimmered like a quiet beacon in the mist. Kara followed me inside, tablet in hand. "The press is already sniffing around," she said. "Someone leaked that the Hale merger meeting was interrupted." "Let them speculate," I said. "By morning, they'll have their headline." In my office, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. Hale Tower stood visible in the distance, a monument I had just claimed without stepping on its doorstep again. My phone buzzed. "Ethan!" I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hello, Ethan?" His voice was sharp, brittle. "What the hell have you done?" "Good evening to you too," I said calmly. "You think you can just waltz in and steal what 3 generations built? I didn't steal anything. I bought it legally, ethically, efficiently. Something you've never been particularly good at." He let out a bitter laugh. "You think this makes you powerful? You're in over your head. The board won't stand by you." "They already have," I said. "Check your inbox." I could almost hear the moment he opened the email. Silence followed by a breathless curse. "You orchestrated this." "I executed it," I corrected him. "There's a difference." "You won't last a week," he snapped. "You don't know what it takes to run a company of this size." "I know more than you think," I said. "And I have something you never did." "Oh, enlighten me." I smiled to myself. "Vision." The line went dead. For a moment I stood there, staring at my reflection in the glass, the calm face of a woman who'd spent years being underestimated, the woman who had just turned her family's empire into her own. But beneath the triumph, a flicker of unease lingered. Because I knew power didn't erase pain, it only gave it a new address. Kara reappeared in the doorway. "You should eat something," she said softly. "I'm fine." She hesitated. "There's a message from your mother." I froze. "Read it." She says, "You've embarrassed your father. Whatever you think you've won, you'll regret it." I let out a breath somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. Of course she did. Kara shifted uneasily. "What are you going to do about it?" "Nothing," I said. "You can't fight ghosts with logic." That night I stayed in the office long after everyone else left. The city outside glowed like circuitry pulsing with rain and electricity. I spread the financial statements across my desk, scanning them line by line. The numbers told a story Ethan never wanted to see. Hale Industries was drowning. Over-leveraged loans, empty office towers, projects stalled mid-construction. His precious empire had been a glass castle waiting for a crack, and I had given it one. By 2 a.m, I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion tugging at the edges of my mind. My phone lit up again, this time an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "You don't know what you've started." The body of the message was blank except for a single attachment, an internal memo from Titan Holdings, the company Ethan had been courting for a merger. The memo detailed something far worse than bad accounting. It was evidence of insider trading, massive, orchestrated, and signed off by someone inside Hale Industries. Ethan. I sat there staring at the screen as the truth sank in. He hadn't just been reckless, he'd been a criminal. And now, as the majority shareholder, the responsibility and the fallout belonged to me. I closed my eyes, the rain whispering against the glass. Power, I thought, was never clean. It always came at a cost. The next morning, headlines would announce my takeover. Young CEO Claire Hale acquires family empire in billion-dollar buyout. Forbes would call it bold. The business networks would call it ruthless. But they wouldn't see the part that mattered, the part where I sat alone in my glass office holding proof that my brother had doomed everything long before I ever took it back. And as the city began to wake, I finally understood what my father had meant when he said, "A Hale doesn't falter in public." Because faltering wasn't an option anymore. Not for me. Not for what came next. For 3 days, the city wouldn't shut up about me. My name filled the news cycle like wildfire. The Hale empire changes hands. Family dynasty shaken by internal takeover. Sister outplays brother in billion-dollar reversal. People called it victory. They had no idea it was survival. I didn't leave my apartment for 72 hours. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, lawyers, reporters, hedge fund managers suddenly eager to congratulate me. I silenced every call except Kara's. On the third morning, she let herself in with her spare key holding 2 coffees. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, setting one on the table. "I haven't," I admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. "Ethan," I nodded. He looked, not defeated, just cornered. I've seen that look before. She sank onto the couch beside me. He's been quiet. Too quiet. No press appearances, no statements, not even a leak. It's not like him. "That's exactly why I'm worried," I said. The TV murmured softly in the background, a business anchor dissecting my remarkable strategic foresight. I muted it. "Turn it off. I don't want to hear another word about foresight." Kara studied me carefully. "You won, Claire." I laughed quietly. Winning and surviving aren't the same thing. That afternoon, I forced myself back into the world. The air outside felt different, crisper, heavier somehow. As I walked through the glass doors of Luminex headquarters, a small crowd of journalists gathered across the street, cameras clicking. One of them shouted, "Miss Hale, was this revenge?" I paused just long enough to answer. "No," I said. "It was overdue." Inside, the mood was electric. My staff stood taller, prouder, as if my victory somehow belonged to them too. But beneath their congratulations, I saw something else in their eyes, fear. Fear that power changes people. In the elevator, I caught my reflection. My face looked the same, but my eyes didn't. They'd hardened. Kara met me upstairs with updates. "We've stabilized the Hale stock," she said. "Investors are starting to come around. You've got the next board meeting at 9 tomorrow, and Forbes wants a cover interview." "Cancel the interview," I said. "Move the board meeting to our office, not theirs." "You want them to come here?" "Yes," I said. "Let them see where the real work gets done." She nodded, hesitating only slightly. "And Ethan?" I looked away. "If he wants to talk, he knows where to find me." That night I returned home to find an envelope slipped under my door. No address, no name, just my initials written in Ethan's handwriting. I tore it open. Inside was a single page. "You took everything, Claire, but you forgot one thing. I know where the bodies are buried." My chest tightened. The silence of my apartment felt oppressive, amplifying the warning in his words. It wasn't a metaphor. Ethan had always been reckless, but not stupid. If he had proof of the board's past deals, kickbacks, bribes, under-the-table permits, it could drag us both down. As the new CEO, those sins were now mine to carry. I picked up my phone and called Kara. "I need you to pull everything we have on Hale Industries' legal archives," I said. "Contracts, audits, all of it." She didn't ask why. "On it," she said. Sleep never came. By morning, my dining table was buried in paper, years of transactions, acquisitions, and corporate shells that led nowhere. Somewhere in this mess was the secret Ethan thought would save him. At 9 sharp, the new board arrived. Older men in sharp suits, faces carefully, neutral eyes calculating. They still saw me as a curiosity, a headline, not a leader. "Gentlemen," I began, standing at the head of the table. "I know this transition hasn't been smooth. But the truth is, Hale Industries needed a shakeup. For too long, it's been run by ego instead of innovation. One of them, a gray-haired executive named Charles Denton, folded his hands. "You've made a lot of noise, Miss Hale. But you haven't proven you can lead." "Then let me prove it," I said. "Starting today, we cut our losses. No more vanity projects, no more skyscrapers built for ego. We focus on digital transformation, Luminex technology, my platform. The future isn't in steel. It's in systems." They exchanged skeptical looks. Another board member, Bernard, leaned forward. "And what about your brother? What about him? He still holds 17% of company shares," Bernard said. "If he starts a campaign against you, the media will listen." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll have to give them a louder story." The meeting ended in uneasy silence. Power wasn't inherited, it was demonstrated. And today, I've started to prove mine. When the last board member left, Kara entered with a folder. "You should see this," she said. "We found something in the old legal files." She handed me a thin document marked Confidential Project Elysium. My pulse quickened as I skimmed the pages. Offshore accounts, dummy corporations, money funneled through shell developers. Signatures at the bottom, Ethan Hale. Richard Hale. They'd been laundering corporate money for years. I sank into my chair, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. My father and brother hadn't just been arrogant, they'd been corrupt. And now I own the company built on their lies. Kara's voice broke the silence. "What are you going to do?" I stared out the window, the skyline glowing against the dusk. "I'm going to clean the house," I said. "But first, I'm going to make them confess." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, electric, the kind that comes right before another storm. The sky over Manhattan was steel gray the next morning, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. I arrived at the Hale Tower before sunrise. The lobby was empty except for the echo of my heels against marble. The guards straightened when they saw me. No one questioned my presence anymore. In the elevator's mirrored walls, I caught my reflection, the calm face of a woman carrying 2 decades of family sins on her shoulders. In my hands was the thin folder labeled Project Elysium, the proof that my father and brother had built our family empire not just on ambition, but on fraud. Ethan was already waiting when I entered the top-floor conference room. He stood near the window, the city stretched behind him like a battlefield. "You came early," he said without turning around. "I couldn't sleep," I replied. "Too much to think about." He laughed softly. "You mean too much to destroy?" I dropped the folder onto the table between us. "You should read this." He turned, brows knitting as he flipped it open. The blood drained from his face. "Where did you get this? It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is what's inside." "This is nothing," he said quickly, but his voice shook. "Old paperwork, outdated projects. Don't lie to me." My voice was steady, controlled. "You and Dad used Elysium to funnel investor money into personal accounts. Offshore under false subsidiaries. You built fake development projects, wrote off the losses, and pocketed the rest." He slammed the folder shut. "You don't understand how this business works." "No," I said quietly. "You don't understand what integrity means." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "Dad handled those deals. I just signed what he told me to. You think you can waltz in and judge everything without knowing the history, without knowing what it took to keep this company alive." Alive, I stepped closer. "You mean hollow. You sold the soul of this company to keep your name on magazine covers." Ethan faced me, then eyes sharp and tired. "You think you're different. You think because you built some startup, you're clean. You used our family connections, our name to get your funding. Don't pretend you're better than us. I built Luminex from nothing," I said. "Every contract, every investor, every deal, I earned them without your name attached. You can't say the same." He laughed bitterly. "You always wanted to play saint. But you're not Claire. You're just like the rest of us, hungry." I held his gaze. "Hungry for justice, maybe." "Justice?" He shook his head. "There's no justice in business. Only leverage." He started to walk toward the door, but I blocked his path. "You're not leaving. Move." "No." I slid another document from the folder, A copy of a wire transfer to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. His signature gleamed at the bottom. If I hand this to the authorities, you lose everything. Your money, your name, your freedom. His face went still. You wouldn't. I looked straight into his eyes. You don't know me anymore. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The rain finally began to fall outside, streaking down the glass like melted silver. Ethan's voice broke first. You think this will fix anything? You destroy me. You destroy Dad, too. You ruin the family legacy. The legacy ruined itself, I said. He laughed once, a hollow sound. You think you're some hero cleaning up the mess. But what happens when people find out the new CEO is the daughter of a criminal? You'll be ruined along with us. I didn't flinch. Then maybe it's time the truth ruins everything. He sank into a chair, running both hands over his face. For the first time, I saw something real in him. Not arrogance, not anger, but exhaustion. You have no idea what Dad was dealing with, he murmured. The company was collapsing. Investors were pulling out. He did what he had to do. And you helped, I said softly. He looked up, eyes wet but defiant. I helped him survive. No, I said. You helped him hide. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows. For a moment, it was the only sound between us. Finally, he whispered, What do you want from me? The truth, I said. Not a press statement, not another cover-up. I want you to tell the world what you and Dad did. You can frame it as transparency, as reform, but it has to be you. Not me. He stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. You want me to confess? Yes, I said. Publicly. The shareholders' meeting is in 2 days. You stand on that stage and you tell them everything. You take responsibility. And if I don't, then I send this to the Department of Justice. He closed his eyes, the weight of the choice pressing down. You're asking me to commit career suicide. I'm asking you to save what's left of our family's honor, I said. And maybe your soul. When he finally looked at me again, his eyes were hollow. You always were the better one, he said quietly, even when I hated you for it. I didn't need to be better, I said. I just needed to stop being like you. He stood gathering the folder slowly. 2 days, he said. Then we'll see what kind of legacy we really have. After he left, I stood alone by the window, watching the rain blur the city into streaks of silver and gray. Somewhere in that storm, the past was finally beginning to wash away, but the future waiting underneath was darker than I'd ever imagined. The truth was coming, and once it did, none of us would be the same. The next 48 hours stretched like a wire pulled too tight. I barely slept, barely ate. Every decision, every word I rehearsed in my mind, not for me, but for Ethan. For the confession that would either cleanse our family name or destroy it entirely. From my office, I watched the city move in its usual rhythm. People chasing meetings, screens, flashing numbers, lives, rising and falling by the minute. It amazed me how the world kept spinning oblivious that the Hale Empire, the one that had stood for nearly 70 years, was 2 days away from imploding under the weight of its own deceit. Kara entered without knocking, a habit she'd picked up since the takeover. The board's getting restless, she said, dropping a file on my desk. Half of them are threatening to resign unless they get clarity on Ethan's status. They'll have their clarity soon, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. She hesitated. And if he doesn't go through with it, I met her eyes. He will. She studied me for a moment. You sound sure. I know my brother, I said. He'll do the right thing if only to save himself. After she left, I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The silence of the room pressed against me like a weight. For years I'd dreamed of taking back what was mine, of proving them wrong. But now that I had victory, felt like ash in my mouth. My phone buzzed with a message. Ethan, we need to talk. Alone. Tonight, I typed back. Where his reply came seconds later. Dad's old house. Midnight. The Hale estate in Greenwich hadn't been lived in for years, not since my mother downsized to her penthouse after Dad's first heart attack. The idea of meeting Ethan there sent a shiver through me. That house held too many ghosts. By the time I arrived, the driveway lights were still working, soft yellow orbs glowing against the rain. The air smelled of wet pine and decay. I stepped through the front door, the familiar creak echoing through the empty halls. Memories came flooding back, the sound of my laughter as a little girl running on the stairs, my father's voice shouting at Ethan in the study, and the cold silence of dinners I no longer felt a part of. The house wasn't a place. It was a trap. It was built to keep us tangled in a legacy we never truly chose. Ethan was in the study, sitting behind Dad's old desk, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. He looked older than I remembered, tired, frayed at the edges, the arrogance finally eroding. "You came," he said quietly. "You asked." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, I didn't. Say what you need to say." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've been going through everything, old files, accounts, board communications. You were right. It's worse than even I knew." "I know," I said. "That's why it has to end." He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. "Do you have any idea what Dad was covering for, what he owed?" "I don't care," I said. "Excuses don't absolve crimes." "This isn't about excuses," he snapped. "This is about survival. If I confess, if I tell the board what we did, they'll tear us apart. The DOJ will come for both of us, Claire. You think they'll stop distinguishing who did what? You own the company now. Legally, every past liability is yours." "I've already consulted counsel," I said. "If you confess and cooperate, the blame stays on the old regime. We can rebuild." He gave a humorless laugh. "Rebuild what? A reputation soaked in corruption," maybe I said softly. "Or maybe we start something new, something honest." He shook his head. "You sound just like Mom used to. Idealistic, naive." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "No, Ethan. I sound free. You should try it sometime." The storm outside deepened, thunder rolling through the walls like distant artillery. He stood suddenly pacing. "You think confession brings peace? It doesn't. It just invites more wolves." "Then let them come," I said. "I'm done living afraid of shadows." He turned sharply, eyes flashing. "You don't understand what Dad was protecting. He wasn't just hiding money, he was hiding deals. People, Claire. Dangerous people. Developers tied to foreign interests. If those names come out, this doesn't end with bad press. It ends with bullets." My breath caught. "You're lying." "Am I?" He opened a drawer, pulling out a thin stack of papers. "Look at this. The Elysium funds didn't vanish. They were redirected. Offshore investments through a company called Nex Urban. On paper, it's a property firm. In reality, it's a laundering front. And those accounts aren't just ours. They belong to men you don't want to know." I took the papers, flipping through them. Every signature, every transaction confirmed what he said. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because I thought I could fix it," he said bitterly. "Until you forced my hand." We stood in silence, the rain hammering against the windows. My pulse thundered in my ears. "So what do you want from me?" I asked finally. He looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time I saw something close to fear. "A way out," he said. "For both of us." "There's no way out," I said. "Only through." He moved closer, desperation creeping into his voice. "You're not listening. If we expose this, we don't just lose our company, we lose everything. Our protection, our leverage. The people behind Nex Urban won't let it go quietly." I met his gaze. "Then we make noise they can't ignore." "You're insane." "Maybe," I said. "But insanity built every empire worth remembering." He exhaled sharply, sinking back into the chair. "You really plan to do this, force the confession?" "Yes." He laughed weakly. "You always did like fire." "And you always liked gasoline," I said. Lightning flared through the windows, illuminating his face, half defiant, half broken. Finally, he said, "All right, 2 days. I'll do it. But after that, Claire, we're done. The family, the company, all of it, it's over." I nodded once, then let it end in truth. When I left the house, the storm had quieted, but the air still smelled of ozone and endings. For years, I'd dreamed of reclaiming the Hale legacy. Now I understood what that really meant. It wasn't about rebuilding the empire. It was about surviving its collapse. The Hale Industries boardroom hadn't changed in 20 years. Same marble floors, same glass table, same oil painting of my father watching over it all like a ghost who refused to leave. But today the ghosts were no longer in control. I walked in just as the clock struck 9. The room was full, the 12 board members, their assistants Kara at my side and Ethan at the far end, his jaw tight, his tie slightly crooked. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. "Let's begin," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. The title plate before me still read Acting CEO. I intended to change that before the hour was over. Bernard cleared his throat, his eyes flicking between Ethan and me. "Miss Hale, this emergency session was called under unusual circumstances. We understand there are revelations to be made." "There are," I said, "but they won't come from me." Every head turned to Ethan. The silence stretched like a held breath. He rose slowly, palms flat on the table. "As of this morning," he began, his voice low but steady, "I am resigning as CEO of Hale Industries, effective immediately." A ripple of whispers. Bernard frowned. "Ethan, that's a surprise." May we ask why Ethan glanced at me, then back to the board? "Because the company's history isn't what you think it is. My father and I made choices, illegal ones, that compromised Hale's integrity." The room erupted. Papers shuffled, voices rose, someone cursed under their breath. Kara shot me a look. I didn't move. This was his moment to burn. Ethan continued louder now. "Under a project code named Elysium, we diverted funds from investor accounts into offshore holdings. We falsified development reports, manipulated stock values, and used shell corporations to hide the trail." Bernard slammed a hand on the table. "Do you have any idea what you're admitting to?" "Yes," Ethan said simply. "That's why I'm here, to take responsibility." The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. Rain lashed the glass walls. Lightning flashed, illuminating faces twisted with shock-fear calculation. "I'm submitting all documentation to the authorities," Ethan said. "Effective immediately, Claire Hale will assume full control of the company." The room went still. Everyone turned to me. I stood slowly, the weight of every secret pressing down. "I didn't want this," I said, "but I won't run from it. I will rebuild what was broken, and I will do it transparently." "Do you have any idea the damage this will cause?" one board member demanded. "The shareholders, the stock, the press. The truth causes damage only to those who built lies," I said. Bernard exhaled sharply. "Miss Hale, the board will need assurances that this company can survive such a confession." I nodded to Kara, who pressed a button on her tablet. The screen behind me flickered to life, graphs, projections, new contracts, digital strategies from Luminex. "You're looking at the future of Hale Industries," I said. "A merger of innovation and integrity. We've already begun talks with major partners. The buyout funds are secure. If we move fast, we can turn this confession into evolution." The boardroom murmured again, this time differently. Hope mixed with fear. Money always found a way to make morality palatable. As the meeting continued, I caught Ethan's eye. He wasn't looking at me with hatred anymore. Just resignation. The war between us had ended not with victory, but with exhaustion. When it was over, Bernard stood. "By unanimous vote, we accept Ethan Hale's resignation and appoint Claire Hale as Chief Executive Officer of Hale Industries." The words landed like thunder. Applause followed, hesitant, polite, uncertain. But I barely heard it. My eyes were on my brother. He walked over, extending his hand. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I took it. His grip was firm but trembling. "You win," he said softly. "This wasn't a game," I replied. He nodded once, then turned and left the room. The door closed behind him, and the sound felt final, like the end of an era. Kara touched my arm gently. "You did it." I looked out the rain-streaked window, the city below glowing with life chaos and consequence. "No," I said. "We just survived it." In the reflection of the glass, I saw my father's portrait behind me, dimly lit by the storm. For the first time, it didn't intimidate me. It haunted me. And yet somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The fallout came faster than even I had anticipated. Within 24 hours of Ethan's public resignation, the story broke across every major outlet. Forbes, the Wall Street Journal. Even the evening news carried the same headline: Hale Industries confesses to decades of fraud. New CEO promises reform. The photograph they chose for the cover said everything: me standing outside Hale Tower. My face calm but unreadable, the caption beneath reading "The woman who burned her empire to save it." By noon, my inbox was a battlefield. Investors demanded answers, employees demanded reassurance, and government investigators demanded records. I didn't leave the office for 2 days. I slept on the couch in my glass-walled corner suite, my dreams filled with echoes of the past, my father's voice lecturing about power, Ethan's laughter at my expense, the memory of sitting in this same building years ago as the family disappointment. Now I was the face of redemption, and it terrified me. On the third morning, Kara walked in holding 2 coffees and a stack of legal documents. "The DOJ wants an official statement," she said. "They're willing to negotiate leniency if we cooperate fully." "Of course they are," I muttered. "They smell blood and headlines." Kara hesitated. "There's something else." She slid a file across the desk. "It's about Nex Urban." I opened it, my chest tightening as I scanned the contents: offshore transactions, private transfers, and a list of investors I recognized. Names tied to global development firms, one of them flagged for government sanctions. "How deep does this go?" I asked quietly. "Deep enough," Kara said. "If we expose this, it's not just your family's legacy on the line. These people have power, real power. You go public and you might not walk away clean." I leaned back, staring at the rain streaking the glass. "If I hide it, I'm no better than they were." She said nothing. The silence between us carried the weight of unspoken fear. Later that afternoon, a familiar number appeared on my phone. "Ethan." I let it ring twice before answering. "You've made quite the spectacle," he said, his tone brittle but controlled. "I told the truth," I replied. "Don't be naive, Claire. The truth isn't free. You've painted a target on your back and mine. You're the one who confessed." "Because you cornered me," he snapped. "You don't understand the kind of men tied to Elysium. You think this ends with press releases and stock drops." I didn't answer. He exhaled sharply. "You should step down. Let the board appoint an interim. They'll listen to you if you make it look voluntary. It'll calm the sharks." "I didn't come this far to run," I said. "Then don't say I didn't warn you." The line went dead. That evening, as the city lights flickered on, Kara returned with the latest stock report. "We've stabilized," she said. "Not great, but not collapse either. Investors are calling it a necessary purge." "You're getting credit for courage." "Courage," I repeated, almost laughing. "That's one word for it. Maybe the only one that matters." She handed me her phone. "You should see this." It was an article Forbes Online already trending. "Claire Hale, the new face of corporate ethics." Below the headline was a pull quote from my brief press conference. "Sometimes saving a company means burning down its lies." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. "They're turning this into a redemption story." "Because it is one," Kara said softly. "No," I whispered. "It's a warning." The office grew quiet as the night deepened. Through the glass, I could see my staff still working, tired faces illuminated by computer screens, people who believed in the new vision I'd promised. I wondered how many of them knew the truth about what it had cost. When Kara left, I stood by the window watching the city pulse with restless energy. I thought of my father's voice echoing in that same boardroom years ago: "Power isn't given, Claire. It's taken." He'd been wrong. Power was borrowed, and every loan came with interest. A knock sounded at the door. My security chief stepped in. "Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." "Who?" He hesitated. "A man named Carter. Claims he represents Nex Urban." My pulse slowed, the air suddenly heavy. "Send him up," I said. When the door closed, I took one last look at the skyline. The rain had stopped, but the storm was far from over. If the last week had been about truth, the next would be about survival, and I wasn't sure which one cost more. He arrived like someone who already owned the room. Tall, precise, his charcoal suit immaculate despite the rain still dripping from his umbrella. He was the kind of man who smelled like money and danger. "Ms. Hale," he said smoothly, setting his umbrella against the wall. "I appreciate you taking this meeting on such short notice. Did I have a choice?" He smiled faintly, lowering himself into the chair across from me. "Not really." Kara lingered by the door, but his eyes flicked toward her with the ease of a man used to control. "Private, please." I nodded. "It's fine, Kara." She gave me a hesitant look before slipping out, closing the door quietly behind her. The man leaned forward, resting his hands lightly on my desk. "My name is Carter. I know who you are. Nex Urban. You've been laundering money through shell companies tied to my family for over a decade." "Harsh word, laundering," he said calmly. "We prefer financial redirection. And let's not pretend you only found out yesterday. You're far too smart for that." I met his gaze unflinching. "You're here to threaten me. I'm here to offer you a choice." He opened a black folder revealing documents stamped with international seals and bank codes I recognized instantly. "Your father was a visionary. He understood that global partnerships require flexibility. That same flexibility built the Hale Empire. Built on corruption." He chuckled softly. "On survival." I stood. "Whatever deals you made with my father, they end now." "Ah." He rose too slower, deliberate. "See, that's the problem with idealists. You think endings exist. In truth, there's only continuation. You expose Nex Urban, and you don't just destroy yourself." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You destabilize $500 million in international development projects." "Are you threatening the company?" He tilted his head. "Not the company. You." For the first time, the air between us felt alive with danger. He took a step closer. "If anything happens to me, there are people who know everything. Files, recordings, contingencies," he said with a smile. "You really have learned." He walked to the window, staring out at the city. "Your brother understood balance. He knew when to keep quiet. You mistake morality for power." "Morality is power," I said. "No," he said softly. "Morality is leverage, and leverage is only useful until someone takes it away." He closed his folder and slid a single page toward me. "Sign this, a confidentiality agreement. You hand over all records of Project Elysium, and in return, Nex Urban withdraws its holdings quietly. No press, no lawsuits, no threats. You get your clean slate, and we vanish. And if I refuse," he smiled again, "then I'll make sure your clean slate is painted red." I picked up the document, scanning the clauses. Every word reeked of corporate poison. "I'll think about it. Do think quickly. Deadlines are something of a theme in your family." When he left, the room felt colder. The scent of his cologne lingered sharp and sterile. Kara slipped back in. "What did he say?" I dropped the folder on my desk. "He gave me a deal." Her eyes widened. "Are you going to take it?" "No," I said. "I'm going to bury him with it." She looked at me for a long moment. "That's going to make enemies." "It already have." I turned to the window. "Get me everything we have on Nex Urban. Every contract, every offshore entity. We're going public. You know what that means?" "Yes," I said. "It means this family's redemption starts with a war." The storm outside thundered again. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. The night before the press conference, I didn't go home. I stayed in my office, staring at the skyline, tracing every window of Hale Tower, the monument to my father's ambition and my brother's downfall. Somewhere behind those walls, the ghosts of our names still whispered. By morning, the city was already awake with rumors. News vans lined the plaza outside Luminex headquarters. Cameras waited like vultures for blood. Kara stood beside me as I adjusted my blazer, her eyes sharp but anxious. "You can still back out," she said quietly. "Release a statement instead. Keep the focus on reform, not exposure." I looked at her. "Backing out is what got us here." She nodded once. "Then let's end it properly." When we stepped into the lobby, the air was electric. Dozens of reporters shouted questions, microphones pushed forward, flashes going off like lightning. I didn't flinch. I just walked to the podium, my heels echoing against the marble floor. "Thank you for being here," I began, my voice steady through the chaos. "My name is Claire Hale, and as of this week, I am the CEO of Hale Industries. Today I'm here to tell you the truth." A hush rippled through the crowd. For decades, this company has operated under a lie, a web of corruption, money laundering, and illegal partnerships. My father and my brother were responsible for those actions. They used shell corporations to hide profits and manipulated stock to protect their image. Cameras flashed. Gasps cut through the silence. "I could have buried it," I continued. "I could have signed the deal that was offered to me yesterday, a deal that would have kept Nexurban and its affiliates hidden, that would have protected my comfort and destroyed my conscience. I chose not to." I felt Kara's eyes on me from the wings of the room. The weight of what I was doing pressed like gravity, but I stood taller. "I've submitted every record to the Department of Justice. We will cooperate fully with all investigations. Hale Industries will not hide behind legacy any longer. We will build something new. Something honest." Reporters erupted with questions about Nexurban, about Ethan, about me. I raised a hand, silencing them. "This is not a story of destruction," I said. "It's a story of redemption. Not for my family name, but for everyone who ever believed truth was weakness. It isn't. It's the foundation of strength." I stepped back, the noise swelling again. Kara appeared at my side, her expression unreadable. "You just declared war," she whispered. "I know," I said. "Now let's win it." Outside, the storm had finally broken into sunlight. I walked through the crowd, feeling the shift in the air, fear, curiosity, respect. Every camera turned as I passed. By noon, the markets reacted. Hale's stock plummeted, then plateaued, then began to climb again. Investors weren't loyal to morality, they were loyal to momentum. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that for once the company's books reflected reality. That evening, I met Ethan in the only place left where we could talk without pretense, the rooftop of our father's old skyscraper. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, the city glowing like embers below us. "You did it," he said softly, hands in his pockets. "You burned it all down." I looked at him. "No, I lit the truth. Whatever burns isn't worth saving." He smiled faintly. "You talk like Dad when he still believes in something." "Maybe he would have believed in me too," I said. He didn't answer. For a long moment we stood in silence, two broken pieces of a name too heavy to carry. Finally he said, "They'll come after you. I know. You'll lose friends. Already have. You'll be alone." I turned to him. "Not entirely." He nodded once, a quiet surrender. "You're stronger than I ever was." "No," I said, "just less afraid." When I left him, the city below shimmered like a promise. A week later, Forbes ran another headline: Claire Hale's reckoning from heir to CEO, from cover-up to comeback. The photo showed me not in a boardroom, but walking through the construction site of the new Luminex campus, a symbol of what was coming next. Rebuilding, reforming, healing. In the weeks that followed, I launched the Hale Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to funding women-led startups and corporate ethics initiatives. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same empire that had once corrupted everything it touched would now find truth. On the day of its launch, I stood before my staff, the new generation of Hale Industries. Power isn't about control, I told them. It's about accountability. If you can face the truth, you can survive anything. Applause rose like thunder. Later, when the lights dimmed and the building emptied, I found myself alone again, my reflection cast against the glass, the city alive beyond it. This was the peace my father never found, the justice my brother never sought, and the redemption I didn't know I was capable of. I took a breath, letting the silence settle. Then I smiled. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes of someone else's mistakes, I whispered, tell me your story. Because sometimes the truest revenge isn't winning, it's becoming whole. The lights of the city flickered back at me like applause, and for the first time I felt free.
You're out, Sophie. I've removed your name from the credits. The documentary belongs to me now. Marcus's voice crackled through my phone as I stood in the elegant lobby of the Sundance Film Festival. I gripped my phone tighter, watching fellow filmmakers mill about, completely unaware of the bomb that had just been dropped on my career. You can't do that, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. I spent 3 years of my life on this project. Half of that footage is mine. Marcus laughed, the same arrogant laugh I'd grown to hate over the past few months. Check your contract again, sweetheart. As the production company owner, I have final say over credits and ownership. You were just a contractor. I closed my eyes, remembering all the nights I'd spent in remote villages, documenting the disappearing indigenous art forms that formed the heart of our documentary. Marcus had barely left his comfortable office in New York, yet here he was, trying to erase my contributions entirely. Why? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The documentary was already generating buzz. Early reviews were glowing. Prize money and prestige were on the line. Let's be honest, Sophie. You don't have the connections to take this film where it needs to go. I do. Consider this a business decision. The line went dead. I stood there, surrounded by the excited chatter of other filmmakers, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. But beneath the shock and anger, a small smile crept onto my face. Marcus had made one critical mistake. My name is Sophie Chen, and at 32, I'd spent my entire adult life behind a camera, documenting stories that others overlooked. This documentary about vanishing indigenous art forms had been my passion project, one I pitched to Marcus's production company 3 years ago. He'd seen the potential for awards and funded it, but the heart and soul of the project, that was all me. What Marcus didn't know was that I still had all the original footage. Every interview, every sacred ceremony we'd been allowed to film, every raw, unedited moment was safely stored in multiple locations, including footage that would absolutely destroy his reputation if it ever got out. I made my way to my hotel room, my mind racing with possibilities. The festival screening was in 3 days. Marcus would be premiering his version of our documentary, likely edited to minimize my visible presence and contributions. But he had no idea what I had planned. Sitting at the desk in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were clips I kept separate from the main documentary footage. There was Marcus, drunk at a sacred ceremony, making inappropriate comments about the tribal elders. Marcus demanding that we stage scenes for more dramatic effect, even when it meant misrepresenting cultural practices. And most damaging of all, Marcus admitting on camera that he had no real interest in preserving indigenous art. He just wanted something exotic to make his name in the documentary world. I kept these clips not out of malice, but because something in my gut had told me to be careful. After 15 years in documentary filmmaking, I learned to trust those instincts. My phone buzzed with a text from Amar, my sound engineer and longtime friend. Just heard what Marcus did. That snake. What's the plan? I smiled, remembering how Amar had been there through every step of filming, witnessing Marcus's gradual transformation from enthusiastic producer to controlling egomaniac. Remember that backup drive we made? I texted back. Time to use it. The one with all his beautiful moments, Amar replied. Oh, this is going to be good. I spent the next hour making calls to contacts I'd made during filming, the indigenous artists, community leaders, and local guides who had shared their stories with us. Many had become friends, trusting me with ceremonies and traditions rarely shown to outsiders. They were as much a part of this film as I was, and they deserved to know what was happening. To my surprise, they weren't just supportive. They were ready to help. We trusted you, Sophie, not him, said Maria, an elderly weaver we'd filmed in Peru. Our stories are sacred. They shouldn't be used for one man's glory. By midnight, I had a plan forming. Marcus thought he could erase me from the project, but he'd forgotten something crucial. In documentary filmmaking, authenticity is everything. And I had proof that his version of the film was anything but authentic. I was about to show Marcus exactly why you don't betray someone who carries a camera everywhere. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the moment 3 years ago when I first pitched this project to Marcus. He'd seemed so different then, passionate, supportive, eager to help tell these important stories. Or maybe I'd just seen what I wanted to see. Either way, in 3 days he would learn that some stories can't be controlled or contained. They belong to the people who lived them, who shared them, who captured them through a lens with respect and care. And I was going to make sure those stories were told the right way, no matter what it cost me. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Marcus. I expect you to handle this professionally. Don't make a scene at the festival. I smiled at the screen, thinking of the footage safely backed up in 3 different locations. Don't worry, I typed back. I'll let the film speak for itself. Tomorrow would be interesting. Very interesting indeed. The next morning, I met Amar in a small cafe near the festival venue. He arrived with his laptop and a determined look in his eyes. I've edited together a 10-minute compilation of Marcus's finest moments, he said, sliding into the booth. Want to see? I nodded, and he turned the laptop toward me. The footage was devastating. There was Marcus ordering local artists to speed up their traditional crafting processes for better television. Marcus mocking sacred ceremonies when he thought the cameras were off. Marcus bragging about how he would fix it in post to make the story more marketable. This is perfect, I said, closing the laptop. But we need to be strategic about how we use it. Just then, my phone lit up with notifications. Marcus had just posted on social media, promoting the documentary's premiere. The post included beautiful stills from my footage, with a long self-congratulatory caption about his vision and 3 years of dedication to showcasing indigenous cultures. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. He's using your shots, Amar growled, looking at his own phone. The ones you took while he was sitting in his hotel room complaining about the heat. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the warm liquid calm my nerves. Let him. He's just making this easier for us. We spent the next few hours preparing our counter move. I reached out to several journalists who covered the independent film scene, particularly those known for their integrity and interest in ethical filmmaking. I have a story about the real making of vanishing arts, I wrote, including footage that never made it to the final cut. By afternoon, 3 major industry publications had expressed interest. But the response that really caught my attention came from Diana Torres, a respected documentary filmmaker who also sat on the festival's ethics committee. This is serious, she wrote after I sent her some sample clips. The festival needs to know about this before the premiere. Can you meet today? I met Diana at her hotel suite, where she watched the footage with growing concern. This isn't just about credit theft, she said finally. This is about the exploitation of indigenous communities and misrepresentation of their cultures. The festival takes these issues very seriously. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Heard you've been talking to people at the festival. Remember your NDA. One wrong move and I'll bury you in legal fees. I showed the message to Diana, who scoffed. NDAs don't cover ethical violations. He should know that. We spent the next 2 hours going through my documentation, agreements with the indigenous communities, original shooting schedules showing I had been on location while Marcus stayed behind, and most importantly, the unedited footage showing how those communities had trusted me, not him, with their stories. The premiere is tomorrow night, Diana said, checking her calendar. I'm calling an emergency meeting of the ethics committee for this evening. Will you testify? I thought about everything I had to lose. Future contracts, industry connections, my reputation if Marcus somehow spun this against me. Then I thought about Maria, the weaver in Peru, and all the others who had shared their sacred traditions with us, trusting us to tell their stories with respect. Yes, I said. I'll testify. The ethics committee meeting lasted 3 hours. I presented my evidence calmly and methodically, letting the footage speak for itself. Panel members watched in silence as the real Marcus was revealed through his own words and actions. As the meeting concluded, the committee chair turned to me. We'll need to review all of this carefully, but I want you to know that your professionalism in handling this situation is noted. It would have been easy to just leak this to the press. I nodded, gathering my materials. These stories are too important for that. They deserve better than scandal headlines. Walking back to my hotel that night, I felt lighter somehow. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for what was right. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, of course. "You've made a big mistake," his message read. "No one will work with you after this. I'll make sure of it." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I texted Amar. "It's done. Now we wait." His reply came quickly. "Whatever happens, you did the right thing. Want to get a drink? Looks like we both could use one." I smiled, grateful not for the first time for friends like Amar who stood by me even when everything was falling apart. "Meet you in 10, I replied. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or professional suicide. But tonight, I would raise a glass to staying true to myself and the stories I had promised to tell. The morning of the premiere, I woke up to an email from the festival's ethics committee. My heart pounded as I opened it, reading the carefully worded message twice to make sure I understood correctly. The committee had reached a decision. The documentary would still premiere, but with a crucial caveat. It would be shown in its original form, with my full credits restored. Additionally, Marcus's production company would be placed under review for ethical violations. I barely had time to process this when my phone rang. It was Maria, the weaver from Peru. "Sophie, the whole village is watching the live stream of the festival tonight. We're proud of you for standing up for our stories." Her words brought tears to my eyes. This was what mattered, not the awards, not the recognition, but the trust these communities had placed in me. The hours before the premiere passed in a blur. I chose my outfit carefully, a hand-woven shawl Maria had gifted me, paired with a simple black dress. As I entered the theater, I could feel the tension in the air. Industry insiders were whispering, having clearly heard rumors about the ethics committee's decision. Marcus was there, standing in the lobby with a group of executives. When he saw me, his face contorted with rage. He started walking toward me, but Diana from the ethics committee smoothly intercepted him. "I wouldn't," I heard her say quietly. "You're already on thin ice." The lights dimmed and the documentary began. Watching it on the big screen, I felt a surge of pride. Every frame captured the beauty and dignity of the indigenous artists we'd filmed. Their stories shone through exactly as they should. When the credits rolled, my name was there, directed by Sophie Chen and Marcus Reynolds. The audience erupted in applause, but it wasn't over yet. The festival director stepped onto the stage. "We have a special announcement," she began. "This film has been selected for our special jury prize for cultural documentation. However, in light of recent developments, the award will be presented solely to Sophie Chen, in recognition of her commitment to ethical filmmaking and cultural preservation." The applause grew louder. I made my way to the stage, feeling slightly dizzy. As I accepted the award, I saw Marcus storming out of the theater, his face red with fury. "I'd like to dedicate this award to the incredible artists who shared their stories with us," I said into the microphone. "Their trust and friendship taught me that true documentary filmmaking isn't about glory or awards. It's about honoring the truth of people's lives." After the ceremony, I was surrounded by well-wishers and industry contacts. Several offered me directing opportunities for new projects. But the most meaningful moment came when I checked my phone and found a flood of messages from the communities we'd filmed, celebrating the victory. Later that night, at the festival's closing party, Amar found me on the terrace. "Have you heard?" he asked, grinning. "Marcus's company is facing a full investigation. Several other filmmakers have come forward with similar stories about him taking credit for their work." I nodded, sipping my champagne. "It's not about revenge, you know. It's about doing right by the stories we tell." Speaking of stories, Amar said, "I heard National Geographic is interested in your next project. Something about traditional music preservation." I smiled, thinking of all the possibilities ahead. "Yes, but this time I'm doing it my way. No compromises." The next morning, as I packed for my flight home, I received one final email from the festival, an invitation to join their documentary ethics advisory board. They wanted my help in developing guidelines to protect both filmmakers and the communities they document. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "You've ruined me. I hope you're happy." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I opened my laptop and began writing a treatment for my next documentary. This time, my name would be there from the start, along with a promise to all the people who would trust me with their stories. Integrity first, always. 3 years of work had culminated in this moment, but it wasn't the award that made me proud. It was knowing that somewhere in Peru, Maria and her village were watching their stories being told with the respect they deserved. Sometimes, standing up for what's right means risking everything. But as I'd learned, the truth has a way of coming out, especially when you've got it all on camera. The festival was ending, but my journey was just beginning. And this time, I would be the one holding the camera, telling the stories that needed to be told my way.